to a show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Mats Podcast. And thanks everybody for listening. It's been a wild week. Y'all aren't seeing it on the inside and on the background of it, but it's been wild over here. So this week's guest, I'm going to be welcoming Mr. Chad Kuhn from over at Team East Coast BJJ. And Chad and I are going to just kind of open up and chat, learn about his martial arts background and what got him into the game. And you all are going to be along for the listen. So thank you all. And thank you, Chad, for joining us.
Yeah, man.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling pretty good.
Good. So I guess just jumping right out there and really want to know your martial arts journey. When did that begin for you? Like what kind of propelled you just into martial arts, period?
Yeah, so I started like most guys my age or most kids my age. I'll be 48 years old this year. So grew up, kid of the 80s. So my dad got me in karate, back in the day. I've always been kind of small in stature. I'm tall, but I'm thin. Even now I'm 6 foot, 160 pounds ish on a good day. That's my heaviest. So I always grew up as a small kid. My dad wanted me able to, defend myself if I ever needed it. So what'd you do in the 80s? You found a karate school, So I was, pretty heavy into karate back in the day and went pretty hard for about, I'd say 3 or 4 years, got to like my brown belt and then got to like middle school and high school and kind of lost the interest for it. And, other things piqued my interest. But something always brought me back to martial arts. Even in high school, I would go back to karate for a little bit. And then I'm like, I wasn't digging it. And then I'd do something else. I did boxing for a little bit. And then when the UFC really hit, I was a junior in high school when the UFC hit, but really didn't know what it was until after. And I went to like Blockbuster Video and saw those videos and I started renting them all. Right. And something really piqued me about Hoist Gracie. And I've said before on other shows, like, I don't want to say that the people I looked up to were getting beat by him, but they did what I did, right? They did some type of karate or striking art. And this little dude in pajamas are choking everybody out. And, I'm like, what is this? And, I found jujitsu later on in our area in Canton, Ohio. There just wasn't anything around like that, like grappling. In 2004 is when I started my jujitsu journey.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Like right before the UFC really hit with the Ultimate Fighter and everything.
Yeah. So MMA got really big when I started jiu-jitsu too. So that whole seeing that progression was crazy too.
Yeah, I always say with the MMA crowd, and well, I'm a comic book fan too, so I'm a fan of two things that have very passionate fans, I guess, maybe, or passionate or temperamental. It depends on what
both, right? Yeah.
But when 2005 hit and Ultimate Fighter dropped and then Brock Lesnar went to the UFC, all of a sudden everyone was interested in martial arts.
Right.
So and myself included, I was in on the UFC a little early and then kind of out. My buddy was a black belt in Taekwondo, and his parents, they rented UFC 1 for him at a local video store, and we sat in the basement where I want to say I was probably a sophomore when so this might have been 95 when they rented the VHS for us. And I think he was a freshman, I believe. He might not have even been in high school yet. I don't know. But we all sat in the basement, watched it, and we were excited. We're like, oh my God, that was crazy. That little dude was choking everyone. And, just like our minds were blown. And, we too kind of stuck around. But as time went on, I think my buddy, he was done with Taekwondo. I was then interested, and I was like, oh, I want to do martial arts. I want to try it. I never at that time got around to it. I was just still focused on, your high school sports, like football, basketball, stuff like that. And, around, you started in 04.
Right.
I started training much later, but I had a deep interest around the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't get enough MMA back in the day, right? Because that's the only people we saw doing any jujitsu. It wasn't like today where we can go on YouTube and type in jujitsu or whatever and just see any match you want to see, right? And really locally in Ohio, MMA was blowing up too, even on the amateur scene. So I went to a lot of like amateur fights, and me and my buddies were always doing something like that. We just couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, when we were kids, it's funny. We had one pair of boxing gloves. Just one. And one person would get the right, one person would get the left, and we were one-hand box. That was our extent of martial arts of any sort. It was just like punching each other in the head with one pair of gloves. And then eventually we ended up getting a second pair. We beat the piss out of each other, and it was like, okay, we don't know what we're doing. We should probably stop this. You always have that one guy who, we're all street fighters. You have that one guy who can fight, and it's like, no, I know how to fight. I'll show you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, that one boxing glove's kind of like UFC 1. You remember Art Jimerson wore one glove, right?
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and we still go back and watch UFC 1 and still kind of think like, wow, one glove.
One glove.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, you got the other hand, to grab on if you need, but wow, one glove. Weird. Because I don't think they had like the 4-ounce gloves.
No, there was no. You didn't have to wear gloves.
Well, no. I mean, just in general.
Oh, in general, they probably did not.
Someone thinks to themselves, maybe I'll get some smaller gloves, and I can grab on. But yeah,
I really think hearing that, I think Tank Abbott, remember Tank Abbott? Who can't remember him, right? I think he's the first one that wore like a fingerless glove, and it was like those lineman gloves football players wear. I think he cut the I don't know if he cut the fingers off or if they came like that, but he was one of the first guys I remember wearing a glove.
Yeah, Tank. It sounds like he probably just cut him off.
He probably just cut him off.
He was that guy. He'd be sitting at the bar. They call him like, "Hey, so we got to fight. Are you good tomorrow?"
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Dude was exciting.
Yeah, he was. I know my buddy loved Tank Abbott. He just loved the brutality of that dude. And I think one of my buddies, he stopped watching UFC once they started wearing gloves.
Oh, okay.
He was like, no, that like gloves are for pussies. He's like, I guess. Unfortunately, that friend passed away in 2010, and it's like I look at stuff now where MMA is, and where I am as a grappler myself. It's like I wish he was still here because I know
for sure
he would be in for all of this so much. So right now, where you're at in your martial arts career, because we're 19 years jiu-jitsu and at this point, like when you kind of got into it in the beginning, like what were some of the I guess, were there any concerns coming in? Because again, coming from a karate background, doing some boxing, so I don't know if you had any wrestling.
None. Zero. And still don't.
Hey, I feel like with us on the mat, sometimes it's like, look, man, I know wrestling is key, but we fall into our old habits.
For sure, yeah.
But when you got in though, were there any like kind of concerns or was it like excitement? Like, yes,
I mean, it was excitement. It was a little bit of nervousness because I did not know what to expect, obviously. And my first place I ever started jiu-jitsu was East Coast Martial Arts, where I am now the instructor, and I manage the gym day to day. So I really didn't know. And it wasn't like jiu-jitsu in a gi. It was no gi jiu-jitsu. It was once a week. And a lot of it was a little bit of MMA grappling too, because like I said, that was really hitting hard in this area. And the owner of the gym, Steve Heineman, he unfortunately passed away in 2015, but he was like the guy in the area for like MMA jiu-jitsu. He cornered some fighters or coached some fighters. He used to go back in the day. He would go out to the Machados in California and learn a little jiu-jitsu. He would do a little Thai boxing and bring it back. So he wasn't your cookie cutter karate instructor either. You know, he started with a Shotokan base of karate, did some point fighting, and then he saw like, hey, there's something to this Thai boxing and jiu-jitsu. We need to bring it in and start figuring it out. So anyway, in the jiu-jitsu classes at that time, we might be doing wall drills or clinch drills against a wall. You know, it wasn't just straight jiu-jitsu. That was a little later on when we started doing some gi training. But I supplemented my training at East Coast with my good friend at the time, who was the main instructor, just got his blue belt from somebody. And I had talked to him about where he trained, and he trained in this little country town about 40 miles southeast of us called Carrollton, Ohio. He's like, yeah, I trained in this guy's basement. Get a hold of him. You know, it's, again, a very common story for guys my age that started then. So I started training in this guy's basement 3 days a week in Carrollton, Ohio in the gi. And then I would go back and forth the East Coast as well.
Yeah, it's funny to think, back then, that's just how jiu-jitsu was done.
Yeah.
You encounter somebody, it's like, look, I know this guy over here, he's training, you train someone's garage, you're training someone's basement or something.
Yeah, man, it is a different, I didn't know what to expect there either. My buddy, meet me there. There'll be some other people there. And I try to paint this picture. It's, training for 19 years, there's a lot you forget too, but there's certain things that really stick out. Like I can close my eyes and still see it. I can be there. It's my first class at East Coast. I had wrestling shoes on. I had like these athletic shorts and, I didn't know what to wear, and then I'm going to Dave's house in Carrollton. It's a little country town. I had no cell service. Like it was one of those places. Only a few people know I'm going there, and I pull into his house and it's connected to a cemetery, so I'm like,
wow.
All right, here I go. I'm going to knock on this guy's door. Let's see what happens. And I knock on the door and it's this little dude in his mid 40s. He's like, I said, I'm here for jiu-jitsu. He's like, yeah, go in the basement. I'll be down shortly. I'm like, well, here we go. We've seen this movie. We both like horror movies. We've seen this, so obviously it turned out very well, but and in today's world, we would never do that. If somebody said meet you at their house, and it'd be like, there's so many red flags. I'm not going.
I have a former teammate during COVID. He was like, yeah, I got mats in my basement. Come on over, in my basement. And, I know the guy and, I semi-trust him, but it's like, I don't know, man. Just meet you in your basement. Is anyone else going to be there? No, it'll just be us. You know what? I'm getting kind of a cough. Like, no, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried about COVID. Well, I am. So,
I am. Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead. I don't want to give it to you. I might have it. These days, that's just not the gig, that you run into now. It's like, it's very, very much system where you go online, you find a gym, or you see a flyer. I mean, I don't know that flyer thing is still
probably not too
much, but from time to time, I hear people like passing out flyers. It's like, that's wild because the internet's a thing.
Right.
But that's still cool just to see that growth from, again, 04 and then walking into what seemed like maybe a fight club at the time. Okay. Actually, there was a friend of mine, we worked together, and there was another coworker who he's a Marine. And I remember my buddy said, you know what? I want to fight him. I want to see if all this stuff that he's talking, I want to see if he's big and bad. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't beat him, but I can beat you. I'm using MMA math at this point.
Right.
I can destroy you, and I know he can destroy me. So it's safe to say that he would just he would send you home in a bucket. Mm-hmm. So, but he was seriously considering. He was like, we sat there one night and, talked about the logistics of setting up a fight club and, whose basement could we do this in? And, or maybe we, on Sundays when the office is closed, we had like this little, it's a loading dock area. It was like, maybe we can get the guys together and, let's do a fight club. This was, I want to say it was, this might have been 2007. So I didn't start training myself until 2015.
Okay.
So, I was like, all right, I mean, we can do that, but I was well into MMA and I was aware of the damage that can be inflicted on a human. So it's like, we can do that, but I don't we might want to, I don't know, get some mats or something, or like, I don't think we should just do this on cement. And he was like, no, we can do this. It never happened. But, when I look back on it now, part of me is like, I wish it would have, just so they could learn a lesson.
Right.
But then I'm also glad it didn't happen, because I didn't want to see my friend get sent home in a bucket.
Right.
It's just like, oh man, like, not again.
Well, that's it. Jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general, I guess jiu-jitsu more has opened us up to, like, you don't know what you think you know, or what you can do to somebody, right? I mean, there's some bad dudes that walk among us, and you have no clue. And most of them don't even look the part, especially in jiu-jitsu, right? It's the little nerdy dude that's going to tie you in a knot really quick.
I mean, you look at Mikey Musumeci.
Yeah.
It's like that. You look at that guy, you're like, oh, that's the sweetest little kid. He's such a nice guy. And, you do the wrong thing. And the thing is, he seems like such a nice guy. He wouldn't even try to hurt you, entertaining you. He would just wrap you up and kind of like, look, man, just stop. Like, I don't want to do anything to you. You're going to tire out, and you're fighting and struggling. So it's always the least obvious person
for
in
sure.
the room.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the most obvious person.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So along your journeys in jiu-jitsu and just martial arts, knowing in the beginning, you all did kind of have your training. It was more so MMA geared with jiu-jitsu peppered in there.
Right.
Down the line, competition wise or anything, did you ever take any fights or anything? Just thinking, you know what? I got this little bit in my pocket. Let me go try it out.
No, not MMA wise. I never, ever thought about doing that. I was 29 when I started jiu-jitsu, so a little older.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time I weighed probably 130 pounds, 135 pounds. So I was really small. Never, ever once gave MMA a thought.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Like, it's always that thought about MMA whenever I remember playing poker and we were watching UFC on Fox. And, again, that fan base, I was one of those fans where it's like, I didn't want MMA to get popular.
Same. Yeah.
It was just like, once that happens, everyone's going to now think they're an expert. ESPN, we're looking at you.
Yeah.
I think they're much better now, but
sure, yeah.
When they put Stephen A. Smith out there, it was like, oh
rough.
No, like, don't play him.
Yeah.
But we were playing poker, and UFC on Fox was on, and a friend of mine, his girlfriend, I guess, as a grappler, like, I think I was a white belt at the time, like fresh white belt.
Yeah.
But I was still like talking about the fights, like, oh, oh, there's an opening there. Oh, he could do this, he could do that. And the girl goes, oh, do you do this? You fight MMA? I was like, I go, fuck no, I'm not getting punched in the face. I'm not letting no one hit me.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, like, if I told my wife the other day, we were joking, I was like, look, if I got hit, I'm playing dead.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm out.
I'm just gonna lay there and hopefully they'll sniff me like a bear and just leave. Like, I did it.
Yeah. It's crazy you talk about not wanting it to get popular. I remember those days. Like, man, I mean, you wanted to see as many fights as you could. But I remember obviously going online and buying tap out shirts, right? If you saw somebody, if me and you saw each other in those shirts, we knew we trained or we knew we were involved. And then it started getting into local, Dillard's or whatever store. And it's like, oh, man, now everybody's going to have it.
Yeah. It was our secret club.
Yeah.
We
for
knew.
Sure.
I sometimes think that with jiu-jitsu, again, I want there to be growth. I want growth within our community.
Yeah.
But there's also the thing that happens when they start to monetize it in a gross way. You want to get paid for your services. But what I mean is like, oh, well, I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but I'm going to buy a jiu-jitsu gym and I'm going to run it like this kind of a business. And meanwhile, you got people that are like, that doesn't make sense. Why would you do it this way when we could do that? And you can see that more so with MMA as it started to grow, you started seeing, tap out shirts in the store,
Yeah.
like in Sears.
Yeah.
Which good for them,
Yeah.
growing their brand and
Yeah.
ultimately our goal is always to make money and secure our future. I think, on the other side of it as a fan, it's like, man, I don't want you to though. I want this to stay our
Yeah. And
club.
you wonder, like, we get a little, this is kind of off topic. Well, not off topic, but when Mask, the main guy from Tap Out, when he passed away or when he got killed in that car wreck, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what did that change for them? Would he have sold out? You know what I mean? Would he have went to the easy route with the money and everything? I don't know if he would have, I don't know. It's hard to say
Yeah.
because that's a lot of money I'm sure they got and offered.
Well, yeah, I think that's just the thing too. It's like when you have such a big, impactful event that happens where he
Mhm.
passed away, he lost part of the trio.
Yeah.
It
It's not
it
the
almost
same,
kind of,
right?
yeah. It's just like it rocks the soul, and they're like, okay, well, you kind of justify in your head. Well, Mask would have wanted us to do this, or maybe beforehand it was like, look, man, we shouldn't do this.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But I feel like once tap out gear started hitting, the mainstream,
Yeah.
and then UFC went from Spike to Fox,
Mhm.
and then it was just like, and then you start seeing there are video games, but when THQ started
Mhm.
making the games, that's a bigger company.
Yeah.
It's like, all
Right.
right, and the games were actually relatively decent. Like you
Yeah.
had good control.
Yep.
So I mean,
Yeah.
it's good that it grows, but at the same time, like I said, like we all had a secret clip. If I saw you with a tap out shirt,
Yeah.
I knew. It was like,
Yeah,
oh, we
absolutely.
can start talking.
Yeah. The first UFC game I ever played was on the Dreamcast. That was the first.
Oh wow,
You remember that?
yeah. So yeah, I had the first Xbox, and
Okay.
we rented UFC, and this was when I wasn't in anymore. I was like out of the loop, but I knew, every so often you see like Tito Ortiz's name pop
Yeah.
up, or
Yep.
you know, Ken Shamrock's name pop up. You see, and then Chuck Liddell's name popping
Yeah.
up, Jens Pulver, and I was
Yep.
like, okay, who are these guys? So
Right.
I rented the game, and I was like, I don't like this at all. Like, this isn't fun. Why would? And I remember as a kid, I just mentioned this on the previous episode. As a kid, I remember we were so excited about the UFC. We're gamers, and we're like, this was in, I want to say 95, 96. Like,
Mhm.
man, it'd be cool if they made a UFC game. My one
Right.
buddy goes, how would they translate grappling? That
Yeah.
wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it's but now they seem to have a hold on it. But once I started training, I decided I didn't like the games because I was like, you can't just get a sweep like that. No, there's work that goes into this. Like, if
Yeah.
I've got mount, you're not just gonna roll me over, dude.
Right.
So I think I bought UFC 3
Yeah.
on the PS4, and I played it twice. And I was like, this is dumb.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. I couldn't tell you the last UFC video game I played. It might have been that Dreamcast one, honestly, because I kind of got out of video games for a while. Like I just,
Yep.
yeah. So kids and all that stuff will do that to you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not time.
Well, I think also too, at least for me, once
Mhm.
I got into jujitsu, all the other hobbies took a
Oh,
back seat.
for sure.
They,
Yeah.
I fell in love with this, and I was like, well, I'm not doing football anymore. I'm not doing basketball anymore. I,
Yeah.
I, I can't remember. I used to write. It was just everything was focused on. Like I stopped drinking at one point.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, because I could only train on Saturdays,
Okay.
and I would drink on Friday nights. And
Yeah.
I went in once hungover,
Whew.
and I was already getting my ass beat because I
Mhm.
was still new and only training once per week. But I
Right.
was also like hungover, and I said to myself, I don't want to be a bad teammate.
Right. Yeah.
These guys are serious, and I'm taking it as a joke. So I stopped drinking. And the silly thing is, I only train once per week. So it's like, oh, you can still drink Saturday night. You can still, go
Yeah.
out to a happy hour. But for me, it was like, no, because it just didn't feel, I felt like, okay, I'm trying to sculpt my body. I'm trying to, be the
Yeah.
best I can be to help these guys get better.
For sure. And that's how most of us, most of us are all in people, right? Like I've been
Mhm.
on other podcasts and on my podcast, and it's like you hear that come up a lot. Like I'm all in. Well, I think all of us are like that. We just give it up to what we're focusing on at that time. And usually jujitsu is the last thing, right? That you're all in on because you don't go back. You don't,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. We always have the joke about the blue belts that quit.
Well, yeah, there's
And,
that.
but the thing is, it's not even, it's the, that's the running joke. But, that transition, once you get the blue belt and you're trying to get the purple belt, it is hard.
Yo, yeah.
But life is there too. So,
Yeah.
family, kids, job, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
All
But
that.
it's not just blue belts, white belts, purple belts.
All of it.
I,
Yeah.
I know
It's
some
it's
brown
a
belts.
it's a hard road, man. And probably getting a blue belt in jiu-jitsu is probably going to be, if not the hardest, one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, right? My rule of thumb is 2 to 3 years to your blue belt, depending on how much you train and what you get out of it, unless you're a freak, you know what I mean? But still, minimum for me is 2 years, and then you get that blue belt and you're on the highest of highs, right? And now it's like, well, you probably got 2 or 3 more or whatever years to your purple belt. And then, it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's just, I know for me, once I hit blue belt, I'm still a blue belt now,
Yeah.
but once I hit blue belt, it was like this momentum. My coach was just talking about that the other day.
Yeah.
It was like ride that momentum. So
Yeah.
once I hit blue belt, there was the momentum, and I'm going. I was like, yes, and then COVID hit, and I was like, fuck. But I didn't know there was secret like training clubs behind closed doors, except for the one guy who say, "Yeah, come over to my house and train in my basement." I was like,
Yeah.
no, like it's just us. Like I don't know, man, because
That was a tough time, man. It was so that when we got shut down in Ohio, it was like right around St. Patrick's Day. And I remember having these conversations with all this stuff coming up. And somebody's like, were you guys going to close? I'm like, not unless somebody makes us. And I'm like, how's that going to happen? Right. And then it's boom, we're done. And I had a friend. So I'm a black belt under James Klingerman out of Indiana. And one of his black belts had texted me and said, hey, I have some mats. If you guys want some mats, you can have them. So my girlfriend and I made the trip down and back to Indiana to get mats to put in our basement. So me and her trained a lot. And I had one guy from the gym that would come over and we would train like once a week. But man, that was a tough time.
Yeah, I had the keys to the gym at one point, and one teammate and I, we would go over, and he was coming from Muay Thai, so he was familiar with Jiu-Jitsu, but he he was still very very green, and we would train, I'd say 2-3 times a week,
Right.
and he and I were very similar in the fact that we were shut-ins. We were like, look, we have all our gym equipment at home, or treadmills, weights, and things. So we did all our regular training at home, and then we would meet up at the gym. And meanwhile, and the thing that sucked about it is like me being a relative fresh blue belt at the time, and him kind of a I would say intermediate white belt.
Right.
It's like the blind leading the blind almost.
Right.
So as we're learning, it's like we're not really we're getting reps in for sure.
Yeah.
Like, but we're not adding anything new to the menu.
Yeah.
And I find out once everything opened back up, oh, wait a minute, there are a bunch of brown and purple belts, holding, training sessions,
right.
Whether it be in a garage or at the other gym. I was like, damn it, man. Like I wish I would have known.
Yeah. And it was such a touchy time, to what to do. We weren't still sure on what it was, right? Or how sick you could get, or what, there were so many different, but we don't want to get on that topic. Yeah. That's it.
But yeah, it's like, growing with the sport and just watching it move. It is fascinating. And again, with you having the experience that you have now, being in this deep, it's like, I'm sure you've seen, again, the beginnings where you're here, and then even just where the game evolves and it's changing. So like for you, as you've continued on this journey, like are you, or have you been kind of in a position of like being kind of stuck in your ways on certain things, like when the leg lock game started getting big, where you're like, we don't need leg locks?
Well, no, it's not that. It's just we're behind, man. We're behind because, like, I've told some of my students when I started jiu-jitsu in 2004, depending on where you were, if you were at a traditional gym, leg locks were kind of a no-no. It was kind of an insult. It was like, don't just leg lock me, pass my guard and beat me like a man, right? Like, that's kind of the mentality there was, like, so now it's just we're playing catch up. And I have a lot of guys that are into foot locks and leg locks now. And the good thing is, like, they're going out and gathering all this knowledge and watching the videos, and I'm watching too. But some of them are a little deeper into it than I am, and they're bringing this stuff back. And I'll have my purple belt. One of my purple belts, Dan Candry, is awesome at the single leg X to foot locks, and he's learning some heel hooks. And I'll have him teach class and show this. It doesn't have to be me teaching the class. Like I always walk into like the gym or into my classes thinking I'm going to train my replacement in a way, right? I want all these guys to be able to teach a class if they can. And I think it helps them progress as well. Like I started teaching jujitsu as a 2-stripe white belt, like in the gi, just because it's what we had to do at the time. And I think that's really helped me through. I didn't get those drills in that everybody was drilling because I was walking around helping, but teaching is a constant drill, because you're rehashing, how many times have I taught somebody to open the guard or to X pass, right? Or to stand up or whatever the case may be. But yeah, back to the footlock thing. I wish I would have been earlier to the party, Yeah.
I am still, even though I'm in the thick of it, I'm still kind of in that mindset of like, why don't you just pass my guard? Don't go for the footlock.
No, I am too. Like I still think that if you jump in too deep, it can still stunt your jiu-jitsu growth because you're not passing the guard. You're like, I'm just going to jump on the foot. But there's time and place. If you're in a big competition and you can win by a foot lock in 10 seconds, by all means do that. Save yourself for the next round or whatever's going on. But don't let that be your end all be all either.
Yeah. Like I notice with where I train at, here in Maryland at Crazy 88, there is kind of a blend where they'll teach you the foot lock, but they're going to also teach you that's not always available.
Yeah.
Or if they're keen to, if they're hip to knowing what you're about to do, here's a transition, or, just, again, pass the guard. We don't really focus heavily on leg locks at all.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it's more that, again, we teach, pass in, transitions, and then here's a foot lock, just in case. The foot lock is more of a, in case you need it, type deal for us.
And the way I've been thinking about it and telling my students is especially in no-gi competitions, depending on what we're doing, right? Mostly in no-gi from blue belt and up anymore, you're allowed to reap and footlie or heel hook, So I think we need to go into it. We need to learn it offensively to understand it defensively and where to put my foot and which way to turn. Because as you know, if you turn the wrong way out of a heel hook, they don't even have to put much pressure on it. And you're done. So that's the way we've kind of been looking at it as well, learning the offense, learning the entries to see how we need to dissect it and get out of it,
That's how I look at my learning in general. Yeah. I'm always defending. It's almost become kind of an issue for me now where I'm so comfortable defending that I forget to attack.
Oh, dude, that was me up for a long time because I was confident in my defense, Yes. So it would just, I've always been, and even karate days, I was a counter fighter. They would punch, I would throw a kickback, whatever. But it really took some people, to help me get out of that. Like, man, you got to attack. This is where you're at. So that's tough.
I remember in class, one of my coaches yelled at me. It was like, why didn't you, go for this? And I was like, it was there. I was like, yes. I was like, I was just too busy focusing on, and again, I was very confident in my defense, just knowing like, first off, I have a stocky neck. So
you just tuck the chin a little bit, right?
Yeah. It's almost like, they're like, why are you jumping into triangles? Like that's it's like, because I know that they're not going to choke me. I know it's going to frustrate them and burn out their legs. And then from that point, they're weak. It's like, well, why don't you just, I don't know, maybe not risk that and just attack? Um, so yeah, with the whole leg lock game being at, kind of all the rage over the last 3 to 5 years now,
Yeah.
it is kind of like a game of catch up, but also I think too there's something to that game of catch up where you had guys kind of jumping in and really trial and error,
Mm-hmm.
whereas now, like, kind of being behind a little bit, you've seen all the errors, all the trial and error, going on. It's like now we can just jump right in and say, okay, you guys have laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
Now we're just picking up the pieces.
Yep, for sure.
So where you're at now in again, the game,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is some of the bigger challenges for you all now as a grappler, as a coach, just as a artist in general?
Um, I don't think there's that many hurdles anymore, right? There's so many avenues out there that you can learn and watch and travel. So for me, it's I always tell people, like, when they come in our gym, like, it's an atmosphere that we've created, right? A welcoming family atmosphere. Way different than, back in the day. There were some gyms you would walk into and, you're like, damn, man, we're going to fight today. It's going to be a scrap. And you're still going to get good jujitsu now, but things have changed in that way more than anything, I think. And I mean, I watch jujitsu all day long. That's what I sit and do. I have it on the TV no matter what I'm doing. If I'm eating or, even if I'm doing something on my phone, jujitsu's on in the background. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just, trying to keep up with what's going on. And, I train full time with my guys, a couple times a day sometimes. So yeah, I don't think there's as many hurdles, at least. So I'm lucky too, where I don't own the gym that I train at, but I run it day to day. I manage the gym, and I'm the head jiu-jitsu instructor. And we have other programs, and we have like a traditional karate program, but we add some jiu-jitsu into it for the kids. And we have kickboxing and a fitness class and, youth jujitsu. We have a bunch of stuff going on. So it's that kind of cliche thing when they say, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Right. So I was lucky enough to come across being able to run our facility when I was like in my early 40s. But I was, in logistics and warehousing and all that, blue collar stuff before. And you look back, you're like, man, how did I do that? And obviously you did it because you had to, and it's the only thing you knew,
Sure.
But man, if you can, and I have twin boys that are 19 years old now, and they're going to college and getting into what they want to do. And I'm like, man, don't rush. We put so much pressure on young kids, 18, to figure out what you want to do the rest of your life. Like, and how many people do we know that have a master's degree in whatever, and they're not doing that because it wasn't, and they have all this debt. And man, I just told them, like, try to figure it out. If you don't want to go to college, don't go.
Yep.
Figure it out,
It's when I have a soon to be 7-year-old here, and it's a ways away, but she always talks about what she wants to do when she grows up.
Mm-hmm.
And uncle who, my wife and I, we're very much just modern, just the modern parent of that mindset of like, look, we're not wanting her to rush, we're not asking what do you want to be when you grow up type deals. But I have an uncle who's, in his 60s, and he'll ask us like, what you want to be when she grows up. And, I said, someone's like, I mean, at the time she was 5. I was like, look, man, she's 5. That changes every day. So, we don't stress the ideal of, what your future is going to be, or, what college you want to go to or anything. And I think she's even said, over the last year, like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go to college. I was like, well, look, baby, you're 6, so you don't really know right now what you want to do. So, let's take it day by day, and when the time comes.
Yeah.
Because for us, I'm 45 myself, and in that, we're in that generation where we're told, like, look, you have to graduate high school. Once you
Mhm.
graduate high school, you have to go to college. After you go to college, you have to get the career. You have
Yeah.
to get married. You have to do this and do that and da da da. And my wife and I, we look, we're talking about the other night, looking back on it, was like, they stressed us so much on SAT
Oh
scores
man.
and ACT and GPA, and it was like I had my best friend that I mentioned earlier. He just dropped out, straight up dropped out, no GED, no nothing.
Yeah.
Then years later, he enrolled into uh, I think community college, Baltimore City Community College, I believe,
Mhm.
and he was paying, doing everything well, never missed a class, he was straight A's. And one day the dean calls him in and he says to him, "Hey man, like we notice you don't have a diploma, you don't have a GED on the record here. Like we're gonna have to ask you to leave." And my buddy goes, like, "Look, man, I am paying for my classes. I've never missed a payment.
Mhm.
I've never missed a class. I am straight A's right now. And I'm taking as many classes as possible. Like, what's it gonna
Yeah.
hurt to let me finish out?"
Right. Right.
And that was it. He let him stay. I was like, and I
Nice.
remember getting mad like at my friend. I was like, "You son of a bitch!" Like, I had to bust my ass
Yeah.
and still, didn't even make it. And here you are. You just talked your way into college.
Yeah.
Like, and
Wow.
then that's where it really clicked. Like, wait a minute. Like, we have this rush and this pressure on, the kids today,
Yeah.
and we had the pressures on ourselves. And it's like, no, like you said, there's no rush. Just
No, no, and I think luckily my parents never told me I had to go to college, and really, I mean, I didn't have the grades to back it up. It's not that looking back, I probably had a lot of test anxiety and all that stuff. Like I graduated high school, I've told people, with like a 1.9 average. It was
oh,
terrible. I was
we're
terrible.
parking
And
our cars in the same garage, Chad.
yeah, man, I was terrible. And it's not that I wasn't interested in what we were doing. You know what I mean? Like, and looking back, like I had a knowledge, like I was a sports fanatic. Like I could tell you anything, right? That's what, again, we're the all in. Whatever we're
Yep.
interested in, we're going to be smart and very intelligent about what we're talking about. But
Yep.
man, it was school was tough for me, man.
Yes, like I was the same way. I just did not care. It's just
Yeah.
like I would go in and just do the routine. But
Yeah.
if you ask me anything about college basketball,
Oh man.
college football,
Yeah.
and then it started becoming NFL and NBA.
Yeah.
If you ask me anything about those two sports, and then NHL as well,
Yeah.
um, I can give you all the stats. I can
Yeah.
give you, all the stats from like, 1975 up to current. I knew everything. It was almost a thought like, oh, this dude's he's gonna work for ESPN, or he's gonna be a coach or something. Jeez
Yeah,
Louise.
man.
And that's just the thing. It's like we have a passion. We
Yeah,
had a passion. We
for
love
sure.
one thing, but that wasn't something that was available for us in school
Yeah.
to
To excel
grow.
at, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, even now, like when I talk with my one friend, I know one of the hot button terms these days is that nobody wants to work. And
Right.
I said to my friend, because she had said this to me, and I told her, I was like, I don't think it's that nobody wants to work. I think it's just that we all have passions
Yeah.
and desires that we're in love with. And like for me doing this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting paid for it,
Yeah.
but I put a lot of time and effort into doing this. And even saying that now, I'm like, maybe I need to find a way to fucking get paid for this. I don't know. Like, find a company like, hey man, you need somebody like, like give you some mediocre podcasts. I can do this for you. I'm really good at getting you just to the start line.
Right.
But it's like when we have a passion for something,
We're
that's
in.
where you can like kind of grow. And that's what we say with our daughter. We try to watch what she's into and really, really thrives at.
Yeah.
And we want to feed that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what you got to find and figure out what they're interested in. My girlfriend has a daughter who's 7 years old, so that's what we've been doing with her is like, hey, try track. There's this track and field at our YMCA, right? Like, hey, let's go do it for a month and see what you think. And hey, during the summer, she's going to do dance and ballet. and, just figure where you're at. She's tried karate a little bit, haven't got her to try jujitsu yet. But just try some stuff and see what you like. There's so much stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different world now where we can. I think there's a lot of freedom in the ideal of saying, "Hey, I want to try this," and there's always a way to make this your career. And I know my grandmother years ago told me when I went into education, she says to me, Jake, I would highly advise you not to do this because you're not going to make a lot of money.
Right.
Because she was in the education field. And I says to her, I was like, well, Grandma, I understand that, but I would rather make less money being passionate and happy about my job
Right.
versus making a lot of money and coming home miserable, which, that did happen at one point when I was in health insurance. Like I was, coming home just depressed and having panic attacks at work. And,
Right.
Then when I got out of that and really sunk myself into jujitsu and really kind of started finding something that I was enjoying again, all of that dissolved. And,
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, it's, like I was telling you about, I was in warehousing and logistics forever. And until I got out of that, I didn't realize how miserable I was. You just kind of go day to day and you do your thing. And I worked for not being in, going to college and not being a good student. I always figured out things and learned very well, I started off driving a forklift and then I worked my way up to like the lead person. And then I became manager of the whole place, and for somebody not going to school back 10, 12 years ago, I was making good money, really good money, had my own cell phone, a computer. And you're like, man, I got all this stuff. And then when you remove yourself and you don't do it anymore, you're like, man, that sucked. I was miserable every day, No, and you just don't know. Unfortunately lost that job for some disagreements with certain people. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And when I lost that job, I'm like, crap, what am I going to do? I have kids. I have, some responsibilities and, what am I going to do? But you'll work it out, man. Things will work out.
I think, what really is kind of the underlying theme and all of that though, too, is hard work. You're a hard worker.
Yeah.
I was never really, again, I wasn't the best student, but I think part of it was I just didn't care about what they were trying to teach me.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
But it started turning into this thing where I could take tests very well. You put a test in front of me, I don't even have to have read anything. I'm passing the test.
Yeah.
I look at job interviews that way too. It's like, look, just let me in for the interview. I got this covered.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, I get the job. I was like, shit. I wasn't expecting you to actually hire me.
Right. Right.
Which has happened too many times. Like with health insurance, it was like I was for sure not qualified for it. It was working the call center for Kaiser Permanente.
Okay.
And I was not qualified. And somehow they're like, hire this guy. He sounds like, because part of it is I do care.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it is I'm talking to a patient on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm going to take care of this person. I'm going to get them connected to the person they need to be connected to. But then there was a shift where it was like, okay, well, you're no longer going to walk them through things. You're just going to give them the number to the next person. And I was like, wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for me, it was like, I have to make sure this elderly lady that I'm on the phone with, I have to make sure she's taken care of. I have a grandma. And I wouldn't want somebody just to send my grandma along like that. Yeah. So, as you go down these lines of like, okay, well, I work my way up to this. All right, cool. And then you leave and it's like, it may not seem like it, but it's like, that hard work, that hard worker in you is just going to translate to the next thing, whether it be martial arts or working at a distillery or
whatever it is,
whatever the job may be. So
for sure.
Good on you.
Yeah. Thank you.
it's funny because as I'm sitting here now, I was like, man, like, so, and this is how the podcast usually goes. It's like, okay, it's conversational, and boom, like we're off to like just talking now, like we're old
Yeah,
friends now.
that's it.
Now I'm like, shit, like what do I do now? Like, because it's weird to like transition back to jujitsu, but
yeah, you don't have to
like,
either. We can talk about whatever you want.
Actually, we're going we're going into scary movies, my friend.
All right.
So, earlier, well, really before we kind of got talking, you mentioned you like horror movies, and that I have the podcast on my end as well. For you with horror movies, what's some of your go-tos in the genre? Some of your favorite parts of the subgenres of horror?
So, my girlfriend will tease me that I'm not a true horror movie fan because I don't like everything, but we're not going to like everything, right? So I'm not big into any demon, devilish, The Conjuring. That shit freaks me out. Like, I do not get into it. I'm sure they're awesome. But again, being a product of the 80s, I've said many times, like Friday the 13th is probably my favorite series. And obviously the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, those are probably my top two. It's hard not to. And I like that 80s. Like today, there's so much, I figure, like CGI and special effects. I like the rawness of that time. That's why I like the Terrifier. I feel the Terrifier movies are like that, right? And hopefully they stay that way, because I think that second one probably made some good money for what their budget was,
Yeah. I think they just put the first Terrifier back in theaters because
did they really?
Now the hype is behind it. People are aware. People are really digging them.
Yeah. So I like that genre. Obviously the 80s genre of horror is awesome, but last year we saw a lot of good horror movies. Like we went through all like Smile. I thought Smile was good. What else? We have The Barbarian. Barbarian was good. You know what I liked more? I didn't think I was going to like it. Was it Black Phone?
Yeah, I was just about to say Black Phone with Ethan Hawke.
It was way different than what I expected. And I like that one a lot.
I keep trying to. I have a friend who he's like, I'm not interested in that movie. It seems just very like formulaic and And I'm like, yeah, I mean, all of them are though technically.
Yeah.
But what I really loved about the Black Phone is the aesthetic. It felt like I was watching. It was supposed to take place in '79, I believe. And it felt like I was watching a movie that was made in 1979.
Yeah.
Versus there was another movie, X, that came out, and that was supposed to be set in '78, and it did not feel like it had its kind of moments,
right?
But like what it really felt like to me was a bunch of 20-somethings from today cosplaying as people from the '70s. And it was just too polished. It felt shiny. Whereas when you look at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from '74, Halloween, the Black Christmas, there's a grittiness to it and a dullness to the to the film itself. So it looked like, again, you belonged, and that film belonged in 1979.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. Maybe that's why I liked it as much, right? It's that, again, I don't like the big effects and stuff, right? You want that, again, you want that rawness, right? Of the horror movies. And not everything's going to look perfect. Look at that first Nightmare on Elm Street when Freddy's walking down the hall and his arms are, you know what I mean? Real weird. And it's like, oh, that's not real, but that is freaky.
Like, I remember watching that as a kid, and like, I thought that part to me looked ridiculous at the time because I just didn't understand. But as I got older, it was like, it was like, now I get it. That's how I feel with several movies, though. Like The Exorcist didn't become scary to me until I was an adult. As a kid,
I get
it was goofy to me. I was like, okay, this is stupid. I don't get it. Then when I turned, we watched it. We just actually did an episode on it a few months back, and we were talking about how we were talking about everyone's age when they first saw The Exorcist. And I think I was 10 when I first saw it. My buddy, I think he said he was 16 or 17. And my wife, I believe she was 14 when she saw it for the first time. And the thing about it for all of us, I think they all got it when they saw it because they're older.
A
I
little
didn't
older,
get
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then even when I watched it a second and third time, I was still relatively young and I still
Yeah.
didn't understand until I was maybe 20,
Okay.
22.
Yeah.
22, I saw it and that's when it hit me. I was like, holy shit.
This is messed up.
Like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
No. You
And
imagine in today's world showing that movie to a 10-year-old? Like,
oh
what?
my God. Oh, well, so my buddy who did the episode with me, his wife and daughter came along for the episode. And his
Mhm.
daughter, I believe, just turned 13 or 14.
Yeah.
So, and it was around her birthday. So for her birthday, she wanted to watch The Exorcist.
Whew.
So they let her in.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to get her perspective on it because one thing that we kind of thought about for each of us is that my buddy and his wife grew up Catholic.
Okay.
My wife is Pentecostal. I'm grew up Lutheran,
Okay.
and then the daughter doesn't have any kind of religion in her life. So it was interesting to see what she took away from it, how that would affect her, like as far as like any fears from it. And it's one of those movies that it holds up in that fear department where even without any kind of connection to religion,
Yeah.
it still has this pull. And things like that. It's almost kind of like there's a thing where it's like either you get it or you don't. But then when you get to your slashers, it's straight to the point.
Yeah.
Like, look, this guy's trying to kill somebody.
Right.
You might want to run. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the creepiest scenes, I feel like the first night, I think it's the first Nightmare on Elm Street, where the body bag scene where they're dragging
Mhm.
the body bag. I think that's still one of the most cringiest, freakiest scenes in any movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That one, it stood out to me just because, again, the music that they chose to use at the time, because it was a dream, a dream state. So there's kind of this fogginess to it in the background, like a blur, like if you used a blur filter,
right?
So the background was blurred, but you could see what was going on with the bag. It just made everything super eerie. And Wes Craven, for what he did with that, it was perfect.
Yeah, I have to give props to my girlfriend Autumn for pointing that out. She's the one that pointed that scene out. Like when we rewatched it, like I think during COVID we rewatched all that stuff, and she's like, "That scene is ridiculous."
Yeah, like we watch, like right now, it's almost like that's a regular thing in our home. A lot because of doing the podcast, but also we do genuinely enjoy horror movies.
Yeah, same.
And my wife works nights. So when she's not working, that's what we're playing catch up on.
Okay.
Horror movies, horror series. The newest Scream just came out, and she's not particularly. She doesn't really care for Scream. She doesn't hate it. She's just like, I'm not in a rush. But I was like, we're gonna sit down and watch this.
Yeah, I think it just started streaming too.
Yes.
So we might watch it. We really liked Scream 5 the first time we watched it. And then the second time we're like, I don't know,
Yeah. They're I always feel like with the Scream franchise, discounting the first one, really, like the rewatch value on them, you start to nitpick.
Yes.
And you start seeing the holes.
Yeah, for sure. But then some you watch, like we went back and watched I Know What You Did Last Summer. We watched it last week, and I'm like, that holds up. That's decent. Yes. That's a decent movie.
I think so we're in a weird era horror-wise.
Yeah.
Because we're in this, there's a lot of different things going on. We have elevated horror, which I still don't know what that is, but whatever. I guess I'm going to have to do an episode on it, but first I got to find out what it is. We have elevated horror, then we have the rise of the reboots. People like to use the term requel, which I hate that word because it's just a reboot.
It's just a reboot, yeah.
Yeah. They're trying to be trendy. Like, fucking face. You're not trendy. You're an asshole. But we're in this weird period where at one point you do a remake or a reboot and it was just so bad. It was like, why are we doing it? But right now I think we're kind of in a relatively decent spot with reboots where they are paying good honor to the originals, and then given a decent story for new people, but also still making it worthwhile for the people who watched it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scream being one, Hellraiser being another one, which I'm not big on Hellraiser, but I
Yeah.
actually enjoyed the new one. But it's
Yeah.
probably because I wasn't really a big fan of
See, I haven't watched the new one, but I'm with you. I did not like the old ones.
Yeah, it's just not, I don't know. There's just something about it. It didn't take for me, but I watched a new one. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is digestible.
Okay.
Like I can do it.
You know what? I have not watched the new Candyman either because I like the old one so much.
So it's weird because I'm the same way. I love that original one. This new one, it's weird, but I think why a lot of people look down on it is because there's this ideal that they really wanted it to be the original.
Yeah.
And it's its own thing.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I would say it's if you got time to kill,
watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's like it's not a go. Like I see it on my I guess on one of the apps it pops up, and I'm like,
yeah,
I could rewatch it. It's available. But there's so much more that I have to catch up on. I'm sure. Did we? I don't know if we did an episode.
Yeah.
Like I do so many episodes of things. I need to start making a list.
So we watched when my girlfriend and I moved in together in 2018. We didn't have Wi-Fi yet. We didn't have anything, but she had an old TV with a built-in VCR and the Candyman movie. And we watched that on that old TV, and it made it so much creepier watching it on a VHS and that old TV. It was amazing.
There's a charm to that, man. Yeah. It's like when you watch again, like watching The Black Phone and just seeing that aesthetic. And it's like, there's this charm to watching older films right now with my So You Like Horror podcast. Mm-hmm. We are working on horror through the decades.
Okay.
So the podcast only comes out twice per month.
Okay.
So you'll get 1 week, you'll get, like a franchise or something. And then the next, in 2 weeks later, you'll get a decade. And one thing that I find interesting watching these movies per decade is putting yourself in the place of someone watching film in that time period.
Yeah.
Why the film would be scary for someone in 1920 or 1930 or 1940. We just wrapped up the 60s. And one thing we said about films from the 60s, it's like 60s is where horror changes. And it's like you start thinking about horror as a kid. Mm-hmm. The 60s is the firstborn child. And it's got all these rules and restrictions. And they start to kind of like bend the rules. But then the 70s is the second child. And they're allowed to break all the rules.
Right.
They're like, wait, why aren't they getting in trouble? No, it's okay.
It's good.
It's
right.
Like, wait a minute. She's doing what with a crucifix?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even show a boob.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
But as you kind of watch these older films, especially the way that they, were, there is a charm to sitting down and watching Carrie or The Omen or the original Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And just watching them, in a dark room and, on a VCR.
Yeah.
Like one of my friends, she says to me, we were trying to find Dawn of the Dead. There's not available here in the US for streaming. You can't buy a copy, nothing.
Yeah.
She was like, I have a VHS copy if you want to watch it. I was like,
oh man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got to find a VCR now.
Right.
But there's so much magic to this genre. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like we were saying with the tap out shirts.
Yeah.
If I see somebody wearing a Nightmare on Elm Street shirt, I was like, oh, you're my people.
Yeah.
Like we're in a club. And I think horror is uniquely different in that not everyone wants to be in that club.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And then what's your level of horror? Like, you can watch something, but are you going to watch Terrifier? Watch Terrifier 2 and get back with me, Yeah.
Because
they're definitely, that second one, they definitely were pushing the line at some points,
I have a buddy. I messaged him and I said to him, I was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing an episode on the horror podcast?" And he, without hesitation, says, "I want Art the Clown." I was like, "Dude," like I hadn't planned that one yet, but like because there's some things where you just have to kind of prep yourself.
Yeah.
And I think Terrifier is one of those things. Saw, Hostel, things like that.
Yep.
It's like you have to kind of prep yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, my speed, I am a slasher guy.
Yep, me too.
But I do enjoy, a good possession film. It's just hard to find a good one because, what do we have? The Exorcist, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and really that's kind of it. Everything else is fine, but they're not great.
They're not great, right?
There was one called The Cleansing Hour on Shudder. It was, we watched it just kind of out of like, oh, let's just put this on. And we ended up really enjoying it, but it's like no one knows about it. So it's like, to even say like this could possibly be in up there in that, not Exorcist tier, but it's a good one, but no one knows about it. So it's like, well, again, I'm in my own club. So.
Right. My girlfriend keeps wanting to watch The Skeleton Key. We have not watched it yet. Is it a good watch?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me of that one. I love that movie so much. There's sometimes you run into movies that are, you enjoy so much, you kind of don't want to rewatch because you don't want to nitpick.
Right.
But I used to watch that a lot. I think I have a copy. My wife has a copy because when we moved back home, I think she bought a copy and I was like, I'm going to buy a copy too. Not thinking like, oh, well, we're going to move back in together. Like, oh yeah. But that's definitely a good watch. I highly recommend it. It's just, without even saying anything to spoil anything, it's just one of those movies where when you finish it, it's kind of like, what the fuck did I just see? Like, okay. But then it makes you want to go back now and rewatch because it's like, now I have to break this down.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll have to watch it. We'll definitely have to watch it.
For sure. All right. So our time is getting close to that marker. I know you got to get to the rest of your day. So let's go ahead and wrap up here.
Yeah.
So Chad, thank you for doing this. And
man.
I know we had some time shifts and whatnot. And I appreciate your flexibility in working with me on this. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Before we get out of here, do you have any shout outs or mentions that you'd like to drop?
No, I mean, Instagram, I'm Team East Coast _BJJ. If you want to check out some jujitsu stuff from our academy. I do also have a podcast with one of my blue belts, Terry Seaton. It's called the Limitless Radio Cast. We're getting really close to episode 100. We started, it was kind of a pandemic project. We started it in January of 2021. So just keep it going, mainly pretty much all jujitsu stuff. But got a lot of good guests on, so check that out. And then if you're into, I'm sure a lot of jiu-jitsu people listen to you. We have a sister company called Limitless Tape, like finger tape for your crooked, hurt fingers that we get doing jiu-jitsu. So you can check Limitless Tape out as well. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm going to make sure to put all that in the show notes.
Yeah, man. And I found your horror podcast, so I'm going to make sure I give that a follow and listen to some horror podcasts too.
Awesome. Thank you. And honestly, if you want to come on, be a guest on there, we could pick a franchise or a topic, theme, whatever, and make it happen. So,
yeah, you guys will school me on horror. Like, I'm a horror fan, but
the funny thing is, it's like there's still so much that I'm just figuring out. So I honestly look at it like this: this is all a big ride that we're on, and we're all learning together. So
yeah, that's cool.
After an episode airs, like we just recorded the one on the 1960s, and we started watching the documentary on Brooke Shields, and they brought up an excellent point for the 60s that would have fit perfect in that podcast. And I'm like, shit, missed it. Yeah. So we're always learning.
Cool, man. That's good. I'm going to send you a picture when we're done here. I was Captain Spaulding for Halloween this year or last year. So
play to your strengths.
Yeah, you got to play. Yeah.
So.
So
Awesome. And as always, to everyone else listening, thank you so much. We do appreciate all the support, all the downloads. It's just like I keep saying, it's weird that this is even a thing for me. So I appreciate everyone. If there are any questions, concerns, criticisms, anything, feel free to shoot me a message at bjj.wiki on Instagram or Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. I've been mentioning y'all can email me at offthematch2020@gmail.com. Although don't be surprised if it takes me a while to answer, just because emails do freak me out when people are trying to scam people all the time. So just say you're reaching out about the podcast. I want to give a big shout out to, again, my crew over there at Nerd Rage Radio: Bobby, Chris, Joe, Marilyn, Phil, Ricky, Tiki, all the fellas. Awesome work with episode 400. And the Nerd Rage is where I got my start, and without them I wouldn't be here. So thank you to those guys. Also, as you all were listening and probably heard us talking a lot about horror movies here just now, go check out the podcast, So You Like Horror. It's available everywhere. Go follow the Instagram. It's all the words separated by underscores, So You Like Horror. And have a good time. We're not there trying to teach you about horror. We're just having a conversation, and hopefully you all enjoyed. And last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to my guest here, Chad Kuhn. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, man,
thank you for making time. And definitely want to have you back on again.
Cool.
Like we rode into conversation like we went to school together here.
Right,
so,
man. That's cool. That's what we want.
We want to have you back.
Cool.
So thank you for that. And
Sure.
Thank you again to everyone. Love you all. You guys keep listening to the show. I'm going to keep making them. Thank you, everyone. And bye.
See ya.
Deep with it. Now let me sing a song.